In the last 3 years, over 90 Australians have died from a fall at their workplace. That is around 20% of all Australian workplace fatalities. But every year, many more Australians are injured as a result of a fall. These fatalities and injuries occurred in many industry sectors, including construction, manufacturing, transport and storage, recreation services, property and business services, agriculture and the wholesale retail trade. The consistently high number of fatalities and the severity of injuries from these falls, particularly falls of over 2 metres, meant that it was necessary to impose regulatory controls to try and stop these deaths and injuries. The Occupational Health and Safety Prevention of Falls regulations have been finished and made law, and they are applicable to all workplaces where there is a chance of someone falling more than 2 metres. The Occupational Health and Safety Act requires an employer to provide and maintain a working environment and plant and systems of work that are, so far as practicable, safe and without risk to health. So what do these new regulations mean to your business? And what will you need to do to comply with the regulations? Find the fall hazard. Firstly, employers have to identify every task in the work they do where there is any chance at all of a fall of more than 2 metres. The fall regulators call this identifying a fall hazard. A fall hazard may be required to be undertaken on any structure or plant being repaired, inspected, cleaned, tested or demolished. The use of plant or equipment to gain access to an elevated level, on a fragile, slippery or unstable surface, on a slope where it is difficult to maintain balance. You are working close to a hole, shaft or pit which is large enough to allow a person to fall into. Assess the risks. Once you, the employer, have identified a fall hazard, you must then work out how likely it is that a fall could happen. This is called doing a risk assessment. You will need to look at all the factors that may contribute to a fall, including the type of job to be done, how long the job will take, and the physical surroundings. That is, the type and condition of the supporting surface, and also the proximity of power lines, trees, etc. Conditions associated with the job is another factor. This would include such things as lighting and weather. Simply put, this is really just a process that helps you assess how big a safety problem you have and what you may have to do to fix it. Fixing the problem. After you have identified tasks where a fall from height is likely, you have to fix the problem as soon as you can. Your first priority is to see if the work at height can be avoided or eliminated altogether, or to see if the work can be done on the ground or from what regulations call a solid structure. Give careful thought to the idea of eliminating the risk altogether. If eliminating the risk of fall isn't practicable, you have to use a risk control measure that produces the lowest practicable risk of fall. Generally, the preferred risk control measures are the ones that aren't dependent on a worker's skill or action for them to be effective. Keep in mind that the sequence of risk control measures in the regulations recognises that any one of the risk control measures might not be practicable for a whole job, or one measure alone may not do enough to bring the risk of fall under control. If this occurs, you will have to look at using a combination of risk control measures as set out in the regulation. As a general rule, you should look to put in place the obvious risk control measures first. Don't let processes delay putting in place obvious risk control measures. Only start work on those tasks where the risks have been controlled. Please note that this is only a summary of the falls regulations. You will need to refer to your local authority to find out exactly what new laws are required of employers and employees. In some tasks, there will be a requirement for designed equipment needed to control the risk of a fall. It is important to ensure that equipment used to control the risk of a fall is designed and constructed for the task and that it is used correctly. It is also important to ensure that all risks are controlled when the equipment is being installed, erected or dismantled. If you're given any equipment to do the work safely, then the employer also has to give you information, instruction and training on using that equipment. Your obligation is to do the work and use the equipment in the way you were informed, instructed and trained. If you have a health and safety representative, that representative has special rights under the falls regulations to be consulted on how the employer goes about controlling the risk of a fall. You should do what you can to help the representative make the best use of those rights, because in the end, they are all about protecting you from injury. As an employer, you will benefit from involving employees in helping you sort out your safety issues. We know that workplaces are safer and more effective when there is open and frequent discussion about safety problems and solutions. Employers should also ensure information, instruction and training are provided to all employees about the risks of working at height and about any safety measures you put in place. If you have designated work groups at your workplace, the falls regulations require you to consult with a health and safety representative for each designated work group who may be affected by any fall hazard identification, risk assessment or risk control process. That consultation must happen as long as it is practicable. There should be few, if any, occasions where it would not be practicable to consult with a health and safety representative. The following are just a few examples of all too common situations or work practices that could easily result in a fall of more than 2 meters. This is when you have a fall hazard. Work being done on or near fragile surfaces such as skylights, badly rusted corrugated iron or fiberglass roofs, with no guarding, safety mesh, catch platforms or alternative fall protection measures in place. Mezzanine levels, used for extra storage space, and there are no guards or handrails installed. No guarding, railing or signage around holes, pits or shafts. Unsecured, loose or incomplete scaffolds or railing in a place near to where workers are working or likely to work in the near future. Truck tarps being fitted by climbing across a load with no fall prevention measures being used. Boom-type elevating work platforms such as cherry pickers, travel towers, boom lifts, etc. being used with no secure line and safety harness in place connecting the worker to the basket to reduce the risk of a fall from the basket. Maintenance work being done from a roof such as gutter clearing, painting or roof restoration, and there's no guarding or fall protection measures used. Work being done from the bucket on a front-end loader or tractor or from a pallet lifted by a forklift. Where ropes, harnesses and lanyards are being used for fall protection, the equipment is not checked regularly and before use. The equipment shows evidence either of rust, decay, cracks, knots, frays or a combination of these. Anchorage points used are inadequate in terms of location, strength and with no regard for effect of a fall. Example, no regard for the pendulum effect if someone falls. Where workers are not provided with adequate training, instruction and supervision in how to set up, undertake and complete a task safely that involves work at height, or to use fall prevention equipment safely. Where ladders are being used in unintended ways. Example, using an ordinary straight ladder as a horizontal working platform or subjecting a ladder to loads over the ladder's load rating. using an ordinary straight ladder to put away or get stock from stock racks or shelving.
My employees use a ladder to carry out some tasks. Do the regulations say anything about using ladders?
Yes, you can only choose a ladder to control the risk by use of a better risk control measure. Using a ladder is better than clambering on things to gain some height, but lots of falls happen from ladders. If a ladder is used to control the risk, you must ensure that the ladder is designed for the task and that it is set up safely. Use of ladders as a control risk. If you choose a fixed or portable ladder to control the risk of a fall, you must ensure that the ladder has a load rating of at least 120 kilograms, that it is properly maintained, that it is set up on a surface that is solid and stable so as to prevent the ladder from slipping, is placed at a slope of 4 to 1, and that it is secured at both the top and bottom. When using a ladder, you must make sure that you do not face away from the ladder when going up or down, or when working from it. Stand on a rung closer than 900 millimeters from the top. Use any equipment or tool designed to be operated with both hands. Release both hands from the ladder at the same time when going up or down. Use of a safety line as a control risk. Safety line systems involve the use of safety harnesses and can include various methods of anchorage, including static lines, lifelines, and fixed anchorage points for inertia reels or lanyards. The use of these systems as a primary means of fall protection is not generally recommended and should only be considered where no other method mentioned previously is practical. Permanent installations must have any restrictions on the use of the system shown on signposts at the access points. The installation of safety line systems may be carried out or directly supervised by a person with either a basic rigging or basic scaffolding certificate. Installation of anchorage points. Anchorage points used should be located as high as equipment permits, as it is safer to work below the point of anchorage. The following types of anchorages are acceptable when used in concrete. Cast-in anchors. A wall tie, she-bolt, purpose designed. An engineer-designed anchorage. Chemical and friction type anchors. Chemical and friction type anchorages should be positioned so that the load from a fall is taken in shear. They should be proof tested in tension to at least 1/3 of the design load prior to use. Collared eye bolts should be used. All anchorages should be visually checked prior to use. Harness, lanyards and equipment. Only body-type harnesses and lanyards which comply with the Australian standard should be used. The harness should be connected to the lanyard or lifeline at the top dorsal position. There should be a minimum of slack in the lanyard between the person and the attachment to the anchorage. The length of the lanyard should restrict the fall distance to a maximum of 2 meters. Where an anchorage point is above the harness connection point, a 2-meter lanyard will achieve this result. Where the anchorage point is below the harness connection point, a shorter lanyard or other means of restricting the fall distance may be required. Those using safety harnesses should not work alone. In the event of a fall, it is vital that the person is rescued as soon as possible to prevent further injury by the harness restricting blood flow. To reduce injuries caused by a fall, energy absorbers should be used as part of the lanyard. Inertia reels. Inertia reel systems can be used to arrest falls where workers are required to carry out their work near an unprotected edge. Inertia reels are not designed for continuous support but become effective in the event of a fall. They should not be used as working supports by locking the system and allowing it to support the user during normal work. Inertia reels may be less effective for certain applications, Example, stopping a person from sliding down an inclined surface. Inertia reels may be connected to a static line with a snap hook fitted with a locking device. It is important to keep in mind that serious injuries are entirely possible from a fall less than 2 metres.
Do the fall regulations cover all activities where employees work at a height above 2 metres?
No. Check your regulations for exemptions.
I'm a health and safety representative. Do the falls regulations say anything about the reps?
Yes. The regulations place an obligation on your employer to consult you when the employer is doing identification of a fall hazard, a risk assessment, and putting in place risk control measures when those activities could affect the members of your designated work group. The obligation of the employer to consult you is subject to whether it's practicable to consult. It's expected there should be few, if any, occasions where it would not be practicable to consult you.
As an employer, do I have any legal obligations if there is a likelihood of one of my workers falling less than 2 metres?
As with all health and safety hazards, there is a general requirement on employers to provide and maintain, so far as practicable, a working environment that is safe and without risks to health. This means that there is a legal duty for employers to control the risks of a fall from the regulations threshold of over 2 metres.
As an employee, what legal rights do I have working at heights?
Under the falls regulations, you must carry out work at heights in accordance with information, instruction and training provided by your employer. Your employer has an obligation to give you that information, instruction and training. You must also use the safety measures put in place or provided by your employer. More generally, under the OH&S Act, you have to take responsible care for your own health and safety and the health and safety of anyone else that may be affected by your work at the workplace.
How can I get a copy of the latest regulations?
The latest regulations can be obtained from your local state authority. There is no excuse for exposing employees or employers to this type of risk. Any worker that is working from heights should be able to carry out their job safely without any risk whatsoever. It is vitally important that you remember what you have learnt from this program. Follow the safety guidelines and make doubly sure that you and your workmates stay safe when working at heights.